It's 2020, it's a new year. Knowledge is power, and what better way to tap into that than by getting it directly from the minds of the hustlers themselves? Over the last 5 years, we've been able to grow High Season into a multi-six-figure business, taking the lessons from some of the greatest entrepreneurial minds on the planet via their words. Today, we're going to run through some of our favorite business books to get you reading in 2020. Stay tuned. Hey guys, welcome back to another video. If you are new to the channel, we are High Season, a social media agency helping business owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs step their social media game up and break the algorithm. So today it is just me, and I just wanted to run through some of my favorite business books that I've read over the years that have really inspired me, that have given me some guidance as to how to run a business. So I'm going to start with the book that inspired us to actually start High Season. We did a video on that, on how we quit our jobs. We're going to pop that up here and also in the description. This book is Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Workweek. Tiffany found out about this book somehow. She thought it sounded cool, so she purchased it. She read it first and kept telling me about it, and then I jumped on and read it. And I was, as you can see, it's very well marked here that with all Tiff's bookmarks, but it gave us the inspiration to know that it's possible. At the time, Tiffany was in a job that she wasn't super fond of, as was I, particularly as a newer immigrant to Canada. I didn't have the same opportunities as I was waiting on my immigration to come through. So we were both in a place that we weren't happy with. I had social media skills from working in Australia over the years, and then from a few of the jobs I'd worked here in Canada, but this book really let us know that we can do it on our own terms and we have our own destiny in our hands. This book also was aimed at folks who didn't really know what they wanted to do. I think by the time we saw this, we knew that we had the skill set in common and we wanted to start an agency and sell our social media knowledge to help businesses grow. This actually goes through all sorts of options, from finding a product and then drop shipping it and setting up a website, everything. Even if you're not sure what you want to do or where you want to go with your life or a potential business, this book right here will help get you started. All right, next book. This is called Traction, a Startup Guide to Getting Customers by Gabriel Weinberg and Justin Mayers. Even though it says it's a startup guide to getting customers, really what this book does, it gives you all the different ways that you can get traction for your business, from PR, search engine ads, social ads, offline ads, SEO, content marketing, social media, trade shows, offline events, etc. It gives you actual examples of how different businesses have used these different promotional methods and actually gain traction for their business. So if you're just starting out, or even if you're sort of a few years in, this could definitely be very helpful for you and give you a few ideas. Alrighty, next up, Gary Vaynerchuk. We've talked about Gary a bunch here on the channel. Gary's been quite an inspiration to us initially when we started out because of his crazy motivating speeches. This book, Crushing It, is his latest book, I believe, and probably our favorite. It's sort of like a nice summary of social media, all the different networks, and how they can be used and applied with actual case studies. Often from VaynerMedia clients, his agency. I like this one, even though I kind of knew most of the stuff that was in the book, specifically about the networks. I liked it because it gave the examples of how it could be used, and it was surprising to me how some businesses chose to use certain networks, particularly things like Snapchat, and I think it talks about Musical.ly, which is now TikTok, and how people have used that to gain some traction and to generate some business. So once again, whether you're a new business owner, or you've been going for a while, I feel like a lot of people will be able to take some learnings from this about how you can utilize and leverage each network to build your business. All right, next up, another book by Tim Ferriss, a big fave of ours. This is Tools of Titans. Bit of a thick one. Tim has done a couple of books in this format. This was the first one from 2016. Now, this book, from memory, it has been a little while since I read it, but it was sort of like a summary of all the learnings he'd taken from when he wrote 4-Hour Workweek, which was like 12 years ago or something, maybe longer. And when he started his podcast, which is super killer, there are a whole bunch of learnings he took from all the interviews. So he sort of compiled it into one place. He started doing it for himself and then realized it would be a fun book. So this has interviews from some of the most successful people on the planet in all sorts of fields. If you've ever heard Tim Ferriss's podcast, he interviews everyone from athletes to actors and scientists and doctors and all sorts of individuals who were just doing fantastic things in their fields and just compressed into one place. So, you know, he made this book as somewhat of a choose your own adventure, so you don't have to read it in a linear style. You can sort of jump around and it sort of makes sense. I just found this was super interesting. It was always cool to hear people's stories from their failures to their wins. Super great book, very handy. Keeping on the Tim Ferriss train, the last one, I promise. This was his latest book called Tribe of Mentors. So another big one and a hardcover. This book was, as opposed to Tools of Titans, this book is essentially a series of questions that he'd asked high-performing people to answer, including what was the best purchase under $100 in the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life. In the last 5 years, what have you become better at saying no to? When you feel overwhelmed or unfocused, what do you do? Things like that. So actual tangible tips that you can apply immediately to your life and to your business. This is probably my favorite of Tim's books. We want to do a video actually for answering all of these questions. I prepared a blog post a little while ago and then it kind of slipped away, but we think it might even be better in a video format, so keep an eye out for that one. But this is a great book. So any of Tim's stuff is super fantastic for entrepreneurs, for inspiration, for getting you out of a place where you may be feeling stuck. I really have found these super beneficial. Alrighty, next up, an interesting book that I only discovered last year, 2019. This is Tim Grover's Relentless. This is a super interesting book. It actually came as a high recommendation from one of our clients. Now, this book, Tim Grover is a sports coach, an athletics coach, a very high level. He had Michael Jordan, Dwayne Wade, all sorts of really high-performing athletes as clients of his. He talks about 3 different types of people in this book. The top end being what he calls a cleaner. There's cleaner, closer, and something else, I forgot. But the cleaners are somebody that's like a Michael Jordan or a LeBron, or somebody who is just an absolute dominator at what they do. Now, what didn't resonate with me were kind of like the one-track mindedness of these individuals. So Tim seems to very much prefer working with, or like sort of highlights people who are just kind of, for lack of a better word, like crazy about one goal. And that's all they care about. They eat, sleep, dream, one goal. That doesn't really resonate with me so much, but I did take a lot of different things from the different elements of it. Super interesting one, and it is definitely worth it to get sort of more the far perspective of sort of being super passionate about one thing. All right, next up, the kind of the opposite to Relentless. This is Mastery by George Leonard. So this book's a little beaten up. I read a lot in the sauna, and unfortunately it kind of starts to melt the glue on some books, so some of my collection's a little mashup. But this one is the opposite in the sense he draws on Zen philosophy a lot, and he talks about enjoying the process. He's all about the process. He's actually an Aikido master, which is a martial art. He talks about sort of everything being a plateau, and then you get the growth spurt, and then you go back to a plateau. And it's that plateau where we all feel like we're not getting anywhere. But he said he's happiest when he's on that plateau because he knows there's no expectations. He can just practice, and whatever happens, happens. When you move to that growth part, that's where the pressure comes in, and that's where a lot of people seem to maybe get off track. So this book is the opposite. Whereas Tim Grover is telling you to go crazy on one goal, George Leonard is telling you to, hey, just chill, enjoy the process in whatever it is that you do, because it takes a lifetime to be an expert or a master of anything, and that's what he preaches here. All right, the classic of all business books. I heard about this, I want to say, close to 15 years ago. I purchased it around then, and it's been very influential for me. This is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Most business books I've read refer back to this. So I actually heard about this book when I first heard about the law of attraction via the documentary The Secret, which is kind of got mixed reviews, but if you take away the sort of surface level nonsense, the actual message is very strong, and we apply a lot of those principles to our life. This book is from like the 20s or the 30s. He just explains all the different ways that he's able to discover. He actually was interviewing, I believe, Andrew Carnegie. I reread this again recently, actually, and he breaks down exactly how these wealthy industrialists from the 18 and 1900s have created their empires, which makes it even more fascinating because it's a perspective you don't really get to hear much anymore. If almost every business book I read talks about it, I feel like this is a good sign. So this would probably be, out of the entire list, the #1 highly recommended book. Alrighty, next up, Suasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade, by Robert Cialdini. Robert's first book was called Influence, and this is the follow-up to it. This book is essentially, if you look at the name, persuasion. So it's, influence, of course, is about persuasion. This is about persuading people before you persuade them via certain tics and tricks and all sorts of interesting ways to enter into a conversation. It kind of reminds me a little bit of 48 Laws of Power. And he's mentioned in this book to not use these tips for evil. He certainly sheds some light on things that may be a little unscrupulous, particularly in business. That didn't appeal to me so much, but overall you can take some nice persuasion tactics out of this when you're negotiating a contract or meeting a client or prospective client for the first time. It'll give you a bit of a backbone as to how you could go about doing that in the most effective way to get the best result for both you and the client. So definitely a solid read. Second last book, I wanted to move into a different style of book. I'm a huge fan of biographies, and I like to read biographies of musicians, entrepreneurs, just anyone who's a successful individual. One of my favorites in the last decade was this book here, Steve Jobs by Walter Isaacson. So Tiff and I may have mentioned in our How We Quit Our Job video that we met when we worked at the Apple Store, and Steve Jobs passed away whilst we were employees there, and I bought this book, or maybe he gave it to me Tiffany gave it to me for Christmas the year that he passed. This was a fantastic book because I was personally attached to Steve and Apple at the time, so it kind of hit home to see the response from people that we worked with who knew him or had met him, and then all of the whole windows at the front of the store were covered in sticky notes from the public. It was very cool, and this really broke down his path from starting Apple in his garage to all the ups and downs, the roller coaster when he was kicked out of his own company, starting Next and Pixar, and then coming back and then bringing Apple to what it is today. And it was just really inspiring. And I like taking these books because I find sometimes the business books can be a little dry, and they're very sometimes technical, and they can be boring, if I'm honest. Biographies, though, are the opposite to me. This is like reading a story, and because the lessons are weaved into the narrative, I find that extremely engaging, and this was one of my favorites just because this is such a powerful guy. This is fully sanctioned by Steve, so there's interviews with him in here. He wanted to make sure this came out when he knew he was sick and he wasn't going to make it. He made sure that everything was captured in this one official book. There are others, and I have read another one which was great too, but this was the one that really hit home. We said 10 books, but I had to give you 11. Even choosing 11 was kind of tough. Another biography, this one is Elon Musk by Ashley Vance. Basically, I love this book for the same reason I enjoyed Steve's biography. This one was a somewhat official book. The author had to kind of talk him into it. He actually gives an official interview or quotes towards the end. I didn't know anything about Elon. Clearly, he's one of the greatest minds of our generation, or at least of our lifetime, with the things he's doing for space exploration and for the climate with Tesla, among other things. He's just an interesting guy. It seems to be some people love him or hate him. He seems pretty chill. He makes me laugh on Twitter. He's achieving some incredible things, and once again, there's just a lot of inspiration and lessons weaved into the narrative here again. So I really appreciated this book. Alright guys, so that is it. Those are our favorite business books that have inspired us over the last few years. I'd love to hear of any books that you guys might have enjoyed or been inspired by that I would love to read. I'm always trying to get a list of new books to buy. So if there's anything, please drop them in the comments or hit us up anywhere on social media. Also, I'd love to hear what you guys think about this entrepreneurial content. I know that we generally focus on social media and tips and tricks and things like that, but we want to do some more entrepreneurial stuff. It's clearly a passion for us. Because we've been in business for these last 5 years and we've been able to generate this multi-six-figure business, we feel like we have a bunch of lessons that we're able to share with you guys that should deliver some value. So if you have any thoughts, or if you have anything you'd like to see us talk about, please let us know, because we want to be able to give you guys what you want to hear from us. On top of that, all of the books I mentioned today, we have links in the description, so if you wanted to grab any of them, you can go check them out there. They're all available. They're all pretty easily accessible. None of these are all like hard to get or anything like that. All right, guys, so that is it. Thank you so much for sticking with me on my first solo video here. We'll have Tiffany back on the next one, I promise. I know she's a little easier on the eyes. So if you enjoyed the video, smash the thumbs up, hit subscribe below, and of course hit the notification bell so you get the email and the notification on your phone as soon as we drop new videos. Follow us on social media at High Season Co. and check out the blog posts. We have a ton more coming this month alone on highseasonco.com. That is it, guys. We'll see you in the next episode. Until then, peace.